These are animals.
You cannot do
These
it.
aren't people.
What if you weren't really seeing the whole story? What if we're not trapped, but we're being reminded of how precious liberty really is? What if in the midst of all the darkness, we're getting a chance to shine brightly together? What if we weren't really divided? What if we were becoming united again? Let's tell the whole story of who we really are. The America, where we learn new things together, where we build new things together, where we are revitalized, redeemed, and restored. I'm Jade Simmons, and I'm running with you so that we can finally become who we've always said we've been. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, for real.
I'm Jade Simmons, a candidate for President of the United States, and I approve this message.
Welcome, everyone, to the Operation Restoration 2020 virtual town hall with independent presidential candidate Jade Simmons, featuring you, the American people. My name is Shay Bynes, and I will be your moderator this evening. Tonight is all about bringing you civic discussion, deep, authentic conversation, and yes, this presidential candidate will actually answer your questions. Operation Restoration is all about solutions and none of the antics. So let me tell you a little bit about what to expect this evening. There were many people who signed up to go live tonight and ask their questions to Jade. Now, several were selected, but they only submitted their topics, not the questions. So Jade will be hearing these questions for the first time tonight, just as all of us will. So that's what we're going to be doing this evening. We're probably going to go about an hour and a half tonight. We encourage you, tag your friends, share this virtual town hall with others. And before we get started, let me go ahead and introduce to you Jade Simmons. Jade Simmons has led a life marked by innovation and reinvention. As a world-renowned classical pianist, top-ranked transformational speaker, and business leader, she's driven by a desire to influence and inspire people to be the biggest, boldest version of themselves possible, the version of themselves that stands to make the most impact. She intentionally partners with purpose-based companies and organizations that have a track record of prioritizing the people who work for them and the customers they serve. From kids to corporate, with leadership, college audiences, women's groups, arts, and faith-based programs in between, the result is always the same. She gets people to bring more of themselves to every single table, every single time. She'll do the same as president, fostering a new era of purpose-based public-private partnerships, unlike the merely one-sided transactional deals we're used to. She believes America has a unique calling and a powerful destiny. She believes in America First policies, but not in isolationist practices that keep us from being the true world leader that we were destined to be. Please welcome your independent presidential candidate for 2020, Jade Simmons. Jade, it's good to see you. How are you this evening?
I'm good. I'm excited. I get so stoked for stuff like this, to be able to answer people's questions in real time and share the spotlight with them and their concerns is something I've been looking forward to. So thank you for hosting.
Absolutely. So what would you say is a thing that you most look forward to this evening?
Telling the truth. Listen, we found that that's a pretty compelling thing. When you actually, it's funny to us that answering the question directly and not dodging is a thing, that we get brownie points for that. Yes. And it's how we decided to operate, because we wanted to look nothing like what people had seen before. So we're addicted to truth telling at this point, and calling out the stuff that disables us from being able to have a real conversation about the truth.
That's so good. I love it. Well, I, for one, am looking forward to seeing what questions are coming out tonight. I've been paying attention to some of the Q&As that have been happening. You've been going live on Facebook and doing this for a bit. So I know sometimes you hear the same questions over and over again, but there's always people who bring brand new questions that you have never heard before.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. So we are going to go ahead and get started unless there's anything else that you want to share before we just dive right in.
Well, I'm excited that joining me tonight will be my vice presidential running mate. We decided right out of the bat, Shay, again, if we're going to be unconventional, we were going to show you what partnership looked like. That this job is too big for one person. And if you ever hear anybody saying, I got all the answers, I have all the solutions, run the other way.
Yeah.
And so you'll also be able to hear very compellingly from my vice presidential running mate, who I consider to be a partner in purpose. She is not, the sideshow, the in the background second, kind of pretend leader. She is someone that is simultaneously strategizing on how to execute the big, bold ideas that we have. So I'm proud that you'll see her as well.
So good. So what has been, over the past couple of months or so, what has been one of your biggest surprises in this process of running for president?
Wow. As I watch some of the names pop up in the comments, it is the sheer breadth of the demographics that we have been able to attract. And when you've got people from every part of the political spectrum, that it is no longer about you, never really was, and that you finally found a unifying vision. You would never, Shay, if you could just see some of the profile pictures popping up, you would never put these people in the same political party. And I think that speaks to something very powerful. We've been saying we were going to be a home to the politically homeless. And I'm looking at all of us, our ragtag crew that's pouring in from every part of the political spectrum. And that, I'll tell you what, that's already winning in so many ways.
Yeah, I love that. You were talking about politically homeless. And so some people may have never really connected with, either side of our bipartisan system. But I suspect there's also a lot of people who have over the years, but now all of a sudden feel politically homeless. Yeah. So you've got people who maybe typically voted one way or consistently voted one way, but there's something around the time that we're in, the season that we're in right now, that has them just like, I can't do it that way anymore. Mm-hmm. I need to look at this from a different perspective.
That's right. I think it's been growing to this, right? I think we can all kind of start counting back through the years, whether you're talking about midterm elections or the presidential. And what we've been excited is to see people get passionate again.
Yes.
Like, we have people crying at the polls. When is the last time you've heard somebody crying about being able to pull the lever? I'm sure, actually, I should take that back. I'm sure for President Obama, there were a lot of people who felt like, that was just such a historic moment. But right. We're seeing people saying, it's just been so long since I've not felt like I've been voting for the lesser of two evils. And that is bringing people joy and hope. And we're so proud of it.
Not crying because they were really upset of the decision.
Thanks for the clarification. Crying tears of joy. Yeah. Crying tears of joy. Thank you for that.
Oh, man. I love that. I love that. Are there any questions that give me the real deal. Are there any questions that in your back of your mind, you're thinking, I hope nobody asked me that? Or you're just like, no, you come to these things just like, bring it on, bring whatever you've got.
We want everything. We want all the stuff that you never hear politicians admit, speak on. We try to answer. I've trained people in the field, in the art of speaking. And one of the things I'll say in an interview setting is spit out the truth first, then dress it up, right? People just, what's the kernel? That's why we release those Post-it note platforms.
Yes.
Policy, bite-sized policy. So people just want to know, where do you stand? And then we can get into all the flowery talk and the beautiful messaging and painting the wonderful pictures, but they just want to know where you stand. And I think in a time like the one we're in right now, people need to know what they need to know. And they need that. There's a time crunch on that knowledge, and we're looking to deliver in the time required.
Yes. And those who may be watching this for the first time, or you're new to Operation Restoration, if you want to get information, if you want to see the Post-it size policy that Jade is speaking about, you can go to operationrestoration2020.com and get all of that. So I'm trying to see if we are ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
Hello, how are you this evening?
I am excellent. How are you, Shay? How are you?
I'm doing really well. Really well. Now, okay, so I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Jay, which is, what are you most looking forward to this evening?
I'm looking forward to the hard questions. You know, one of the things that Jade and I have been quite candid about is that we would have loved to have been involved in the presidential debates. And we've talked about our chagrin about not being engaged with that. So we're looking to the American people to hit us with some really hard questions. This is not a light office that we're looking to serve in. So we want to encourage people, ask the hard questions, do your research, really dig into how we will lead before you make your decision. So
yeah, so good. So good. All right. So are we ready for our first question? I see this is Mark is in the house. We've got Sandra here. All right, let's see. So we are going to start with, there's Hannah.
Yeah.
We're going to start up. First up is Hannah from Illinois, and she has a question concerning moving America forward in the wake of COVID-19. So
Actually,
Hannah, what is your question?
I'm sorry, before we jump to amazing Hannah, who I'm really excited to hear from, what we didn't do properly is set up my vice presidential candidate, Claudeliah J. Roze. I just want to back up a bit and let you know how incredible this woman is. When you go to Operation Restoration 2020, we need another hour for me to go through her resume by itself, but she does have her own page there. But what you're looking at is a woman, you know, when you choose your running mate, you've got to find balance. We both were determined that we would not surround ourselves by people who already think like we do, already agree on every point. And even within the two of us, we have differences or nuances in our beliefs on an issue. But one of the reasons that I settled on Claudeliah is that in addition to having a partner, I wanted someone who would also challenge me. Someone said to me in an interview earlier, I was talking about calling truth to power. And he said, just make sure you do that when you're in office. Make sure you call truth to your own power. And that is one of the reasons that Claudeliah is here, because we're so clear on the vision we have for the nation. When you're in the business of wielding power powerfully and purposefully, you need someone who's always pulling on that sleeve and saying, is this the original vision? Are we serving as many people possible? And that's one of the major roles she plays, but also in terms of her background, she works for a impressive aerospace and defense company. And so she's bringing to the table some military expertise, some understanding of intelligence, and an incredible background in production and manufacturing. Don't get her started on the South China Sea, or that'll take 2 hours by itself. But she's a brilliant companion and someone who I believe adds breadth to the ticket. So I just want to make sure I do her justice before we dive in.
I love it. I love it. All right. So Hannah, you are up. What is your question, ma'am?
All right. Hi, Jade. Hi, Claudeliah. So my question is, what are your plans for moving us forward in the wake of COVID-19? I know we're very much still in the pandemic. So I'm just wondering what your plans are as far as what you think the next step should be, what your next step would be, and how you would aid communities and businesses in the country.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll take that one. So you're actually right. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. Against some popular opinions or opinions from some leadership positions, it's not over for us. And I think that being a native or living in Texas right now, we're seeing our numbers actually start to increase again, which has been painful for me living here. So there's a couple things, Hannah, that I think are important in moving forward in addressing COVID-19 for the United States. One, there's a couple of things that are really key to Jade's and I policy. One is going to be looking to countries who are already on the other side of this. When COVID-19 started to happen within their borders, they took decisive and quick action. And now they're actually looking to eradicate the virus completely, whereas we're still struggling with that. So there's a couple things. One is we're going to sit down at the table with these countries. A couple countries that we've looked at and we admire how they've handled things are New Zealand. They did 7 weeks of lockdown by their prime minister, and right now they're looking at, we're on the other side of this. How can we help other countries? So we have to engage the expertise and experience of other countries who've been able to deal with this successfully. The other thing that we have to do is that we have to get back at the table with the World Health Organization and other global entities that are seeing how this is playing out on a global scale. We cannot remove ourselves from this as a leader in the world. The third thing that we have to do that we have not seized the opportunity to do, Hannah, is lay out a national strategy for how we're going to do this. And that includes testing, that includes tracing. We're still lacking that at a national and at a state level. So one of the first things Jade and I are going to do is lay out that national strategy for how that's going to happen, bring our state governors back to the table, and see how we can start to customize this for each of the states. We're still not at the level of tracing or testing that we need to be, and I think that that's severely handicapping us in having a strong response to COVID-19. Those are just three of the ways that we're thinking. Another part of that, too, is working with businesses. I have been encouraged, even within my own company, at businesses that have stepped up to start producing PPE, even on their own, without direction from the federal government, but because they've seen that lack of leadership. And so we want to work with those businesses, make sure they're being incentivized and supported, and building up that new stockpile of PPE that we're going to need in the future.
Yeah, I would only add to that, there are two major focuses that are at top of mind for me. Everybody always asks us about that first 100 days, and I say, if you hear someone planning the first 100 days and they haven't really listened into that third quarter yet, be very wary that that's a 100 days based on legacy only, which we cannot afford that kind of vanity in our planning. I believe the first 100 days will be focused simultaneously on pandemic proofing the nation, which we still have not done. I can tell you from what I have seen here in Houston, we're not tracking and tracing this virus consistently. And there are people walking around who think they are cured after having been diagnosed that are not and are still contagious. And that's very worrisome. Simultaneously, you must focus on creating new jobs. So you'll hear, I know that'll come up later as well. So I'll stop there and say that those two areas are a major focus for us as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Next up is Gail from Maryland, who also has a question concerning COVID-19 and the importance of preventative care. Gail, what is your question?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to share. And so, yes, it is true that America is experiencing a healthcare crisis. And we understand that lots of money is going into taking care of these clients, these patients that have been infected by the coronavirus. And also, we are in a society where many have healthcare problems that are preventable. Things like cancer, things like diabetes, and other inflammatory processes. So inquiring minds want to know, under a Roze Simmons administration, and I should have said that inadvertently, a Simmons-Roze administration, kindly share with us what your healthcare plan would be to help our healthcare system move from being one that is focused primarily on sick care to one that is more focused on prevention, and again, being available to all those, understanding that healthcare is certainly an inalienable right and not just a luxury item for those who can afford it. We'd like to hear your plan, again, that is adequate, appropriate, and effective to make healthcare available to all as an inalienable right.
Okay, so there's two questions in there. You went from preventative healthcare to healthcare being accessible for all. Yeah. And so one of the things that I think we have to first admit is that we have dropped the ball on preventative health. And COVID-19 proves that, because we know that the number of deaths that we've had. I hear the sound interference. I can't tell where it's coming from.
Same.
Let's see. Shouldn't be on my end. I think did we mute it? Is everyone else? Can we mute everyone else to be muted?
Yeah, let's do that.
We were good in the beginning, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll just wait, give everybody a chance. And can we mute everyone from backstage? Okay, check, testing. Okay, so preventative care is never talked about. And that really came back to bite us during COVID-19. We saw the comorbidity rate. So imagine had diabetes been managed in our society, had obesity been managed, had heart disease been managed, had kidney care been managed. And what you said, you alluded to in the beginning, Gail, it's very profitable to be sick. And right now, our healthcare makes its money on sickness. What's really interesting is the countries that have sprung for universal health care. They are so committed to keeping people out of the hospital. They put much more emphasis on preventative care, so they don't actually have to pay all of those healthcare costs. That in and of itself tells us this is something we need to be looking at. How do we broaden that care? We have worked really hard to avoid the divisive arguments that have kept us at stalemates that still kill people. And so what we've been talking about are what are the quickest ways to get more people covered, and also build in some leeway to think about, if our nation were even going to look at something like universal health care, how do we ensure that it doesn't present as socialism? So let's just go ahead and put that elephant out there, because that's what hijacks the argument. And what I want to just throw another little quick nugget out is that we only call things socialism when we're talking about producing and making a pathway for people who are in poverty. Whenever we're talking about bailing out the wealthy, corporate bailout, stimulus is the word we use. We don't use words like welfare and socialism when we talk about that. And I think these are interesting hypocrisies in our system. I do believe, according to the 6th Amendment, Gail, we see there that if you're guilty of a crime, you still get guaranteed free legal counsel. Going up in the courtroom knowing you're guilty. It's guaranteed, right? Your right to liberty in that sense. We have to remember the Constitution was created to secure our inalienable rights. So I do believe there is a mandate in there. And unless you think of our forefathers as being socialists, this is a conversation we have to have. They were concerned about making sure that Americans had provisions. But I do believe really quickly that we have to look at providing more health care quickly in 4 different ways: pulling down the age for Medicare to the age of 55, expanding Medicaid coverage, fixing the glitches in ACA versus just throwing it out. If you throw it out right away, and I do know some people love it, some people say it's ruined their life, just depends on who you've spoken to. If you throw it out though, if you throw the baby out with the bathwater, 28 million people instantly are off of healthcare coverage. So if you're serious about actually making sure that people are healthy and have coverage, you can't just throw these issues out. And then I think lastly, we should experiment with a version of universal health care, limited capacity, starting with the most impoverished areas where there are insurance monopolies. And let's build a system that doesn't build in inequity. What I don't want is free to equal less than, because then the people who need the health care the most get inadequate health care. So we have to make sure that as we're building these new systems we want to try, and we believe in advance that they work, we have to make sure they're built for an American system and for American people who have unique needs, unique healthcare needs as well.
All right. So we have Mark from Texas who has a question on voter suppression and our 5 challenge states. What is your question, Mark?
Good evening.
Well, good evening, ladies.
Hi, Mark.
Well, hi there. My question is this: given that we're here in Texas and we're not able to write you in yet, what are we to do? I was anxious and excited to get out there and vote early and stand in line for 2 days if I had to, but I did not want to go out there and write you in and take a chance on not having that vote count. So I'm waiting.
It's been important to us to make sure that as we spread belief and hope in a new powerful possibility, we don't spread misinformation or cause people's votes not to count. Texas and Indiana are 2 of the states that we are legally challenging because we believe that our ballot access, our write-in status, was wrongfully denied. People have heard me speak openly about Indiana, a state that received our paperwork on time, hours before the deadline was required. And they allowed our paperwork to sit in the mailroom until after the deadline, and then denied our candidacy and blamed it sitting in the mailroom on us. It is the reason we now fly all over the nation to deliver our paperwork in person. We've seen these sorts of things in Texas right now. We were originally told we had access. You could have gone and voted for us on the 13th when early voting started. But then we got a letter 4 days later saying, never mind, we take that back. There was a date of birth missing. So when I tell you that the tactics are, we were thinking they were lopsided. Maybe one party was against us. What we saw in Indiana, that it was a two-party council who made the decision to not accept us. And we would have to go before the same council to get the situation reversed. So what are the chances that the council who denied you will accept you? So we are taking it to court. And here's what we have pledged. Even if they say, hey, we don't want you to go to court, we'll fix it for you. Don't worry. We're still going to court. Because if we're serious about carving out a new pathway and dismantling a system that we know no longer serves the American people, then we have to push through. We can't stop just because we got our way, because the same barriers will be there for the next independent candidate who's worthy of being heard. So we're doing it at great expense to ourselves, but our promise to Mark was that we would stay standing and fight long enough so you can vote. So what we suggest, or for those of you, you can see our voter map at operationrestoration2020.com. Be patient as we continue to fight. We will set a hard stop date, at which case we will let you know, listen, doesn't look like we're going to win this case, or we've won, go write us in, and we'll let you know to make sure that when you do go and vote, that it counts. So we're excited that we're in over 40 states at this point are able to vote for us in some way, shape, or form. Texas and Indiana, we're not going to take the suppression laying down, but we do see that the one thing both parties seem to agree on is keeping third voices out of the equation. And they work together very well. If only they could work that well together when they're doing stimulus packages and other legislation, we'd be set as a nation. But we see them work in cahoots to make sure you don't know you have other options.
All right, thank you, Mark. All right, so Sandra is here also from Texas, and she has a question concerning the Constitution and social policy. Sandra, what is your question?
Yes, good evening, everyone. The average citizen believes that the Constitution is an unchangeable, rock-solid document, yet we're an evolving society. We need living documents to guide us. If we're going to be an equity-conscious society, and as we are evolving, we are moving towards a moral and intellectual crisis. How will you and the Vice President guide us towards an equity-conscious social policies, and how do you think it will impact our social policies, this direction that we're moving in constitutionally?
Yeah. I think if we're going to be honest with ourselves as people, we will always have to revisit wherever we started from. I mean, you think about it, you're talking about a document that at one point considered me only 3/5 of a human, you see. So you have to understand that if that were the case originally, the original laws, amendments weren't I wasn't considered as they were being written. And that's why you do have amendments, right? So I think we're in a situation now, and I know originalists will, are shaking, thinking about even looking at our Constitution. But if nothing else, we've got to at least hold our Constitution to what it says at face value, Sandra, and our Declaration of Independence to what they say at face value, which is we're supposed to be one nation under God, indivisible. Yes, I know for the historians, under God was added later. So let's just say one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So that for all in our founding document, Sandra, gives us the right to continually reinvestigate and evolve in our laws and say, are we meeting our original mandate, which is for all? So you'll see that many of our policies are what we call people powered. And what we've done is we've gone back, looked at promises we've made, things that have been unkept, unmet. We've looked at the historically underserved people groups, and we've said, where have we underserved these groups? How do we serve them now? to get us to a level where at least people have access to opportunity for all, that where at least most people have liberty and justice, right? Access to those things. And so that's where we've started. We can get into the actual constitutional argument. But again, I mentioned earlier in Gail's question, the Constitution was created to secure inalienable rights. It doesn't give us inalienable rights. We are born with those, by the way. Nobody gave us the right to life. We have that. We came on earth with that. We came on earth with a right to happiness and with a right to freedom. What the Constitution does is it's supposed to secure that we have secure those rights, but it didn't give it to us. And so I think we have to always be careful whenever we put that kind of weight and heaviness, headiness in man-made documents, and be open to re-exploring, does it still serve us in the same way? And if not, what adjustments do we make? And sometimes it's not going to be an adjustment to the document itself, but an adjustment to the mindset that created it.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a couple questions coming up that are concerning mental health. So we have Tiana from California, and we also have Donnie from North Carolina. So let's start with Tiana. What question did you have?
Hi, I was wondering, what is your plan to prevent suicide in the U.S.?
Well, Claudeliah, I know this is one of your areas as well. I'll just start and then pass the baton to her because I know she has a lot to say about it. I only start because suicide prevention was something that I specifically for several years took time to be an advocate for, specifically in the areas of youth suicide prevention. My focus was on that group of 18 to 34, which at the time, and this was late 90s, early 2000s, was the third leading cause of death for that age group. And I unfortunately, that number hasn't really shifted much. I also began studying and working in that area when Black people were still sort of the prototype. You had scientists who were studying African Americans because they had, at a point, were resilient, had their numbers were resilient against suicide. And then we saw, when I came into that picture, we saw those numbers begin to flip, where African Americans had rising rates, yet the stigma was a big part of the issue. So you'll see a lot of our emphasis on demystifying what mental illness actually is and destigmatizing it. And one of my soapboxes is making sure that the only time we talk about mental illness is not in relation to violent episodes, mass homicides, because what we end up doing is conflating mental health and violence. And I think that has been a grave disservice to us as a people. And it's made that stigma worse and caused people to be less likely to seek treatment. So suicide prevention is near and dear to my heart because I believe so much in the sanctity and the value of life. And I think one of the first things we have to do is admit there is a growing problem right now, exacerbated by COVID-19. You're going to see our healthcare workers, our frontline workers, people who were traumatized by deaths in the family, loved ones they didn't get to say goodbye to. We, I believe, would be on a verge of a mental health pandemic if we don't address this issue right where it is. I'll let Claudeliah take it from there.
Yeah, great question, Tiana. And I think you're one of our youngest electors, or the youngest. So I do want to give you kudos for that. Thank you so much for your support.
Yeah.
You know, where it pains me, suicide, obviously, because of my love for life, is a painful part for me. But one of the aspects I've been looking at it is in terms of our military. It's skyrocketing for that demographic who, you know, we look at them, they're putting their lives on the line for us and enduring all types of trauma and you know, mental health situations. And we're seeing that the incidence of suicide, and that's, you know, in my opinion, that's an incredible disservice that we're doing to our servicemen and women. I think one of the things, in addition to what Jade said about destigmatizing mental health illnesses itself, we also have to destigmatize the process of getting help. In so many of our communities, going to counseling, seeking out a mental health expert to talk to, you know, just letting it be known that you're struggling with depression, that you're feeling overwhelmed with stress. That in itself has such a wrong view to it. It's seen as a weakness instead of the strength that it actually is. And I think that that's an area that we really need to set a different tone for in the United States. especially within our military. There's such an idea that they need to be strong and resilient. They can't let their weaknesses be known. And I think that that's an area that we really need to just pull back and uncover and really make it known that we all deal with trauma in our lives. The very fact now that we're all dealing with this isolation from COVID-19 and what we've been enduring there, that speaks to this level of trauma that we can all endure in our lives to some extent. And I think that we really have to address as a nation that it's okay to ask for help. It's actually a strength to do that, and then make more available the resources to your everyday citizen on how to get that help.
Yeah. And there are also some concrete strategy, but since I know we have 2 other questions in that area, I'll wait for those and see if we can plug those actual tangible solutions in there as well.
Okay, so then we'll go to Donnie in North Carolina. What is your question? You're on mute.
She is.
And she's back to me.
Let's see. Let us do it from backstage. Let's see. We got her. Donnie, try again to unmute yourself. There you are.
Okay, there I am. Hello.
Hey, lady.
How are
Good.
you? My question sort of does dovetail with Tiana's question in that, you know, I was going to ask what your priorities would be when it comes to mental health and substance abuse, because I think that is it's exploding, you know, because of COVID, and it's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
As well as, you know, how would you handle, you know, people that are, you know, substance abusers, serious mental illness, you know, they're being filtered out into the prisons and homeless shelters instead of getting the help that they need. So that's what I was wondering.
Mm-hmm. I think, you know, I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that this dovetails with criminal justice reform as well. But you know, we talk a lot about the different things that fuel a prison pipeline, school to prison pipeline. But I think there's also a mental health crisis to prison pipeline. And I think that's an area that we need to have some different solutions brought to the table. I was in a very poor part of Charleston, South Carolina, and I spent some time talking to these guys just hanging out in the corner one night. And I asked them, if you could speak to the president, what would you say you wanted? And they said, why don't we have more rehab facilities near where we are? So we get out of prison. Here we are. We know we need rehab. We've been dealing with addiction. What we found is that many of the halfway homes end up being returning points to prison because access to the drugs that they went to prison for is more readily available in that situation. I also believe when you look at some of our interactions with law enforcement, not having that backup support of social services or psychological services results in people going to jail or even being harmed when they're in the midst of a mental health crisis that's being mistaken for you know, some other violent outbreak, but it's not being understood. So I think part of our crisis prevention collaborative approach will address that issue as well. And I think we need to look at making sure that we're not criminalizing people who should actually be getting treatment. If you look at the old drug on wars, war and drug from back in the 80s, early 90s, 80s, we criminalized drug use, drug abuse, as well as drug sales. Yet when we look at the opioid epidemic, we've taken a much more compassionate approach to that. So I think we have to go back now and apply that approach across the spectrum there where mental health and addiction is concerned. And as Claudeliah was saying, awareness is a huge piece of it so that people can get the proper diagnosis. There are many people with substance abuse issues that don't think they have substance abuse issues. So that diagnosis, underreporting, undertreatment has been a problem as well.
And Chandra from Florida also had a question concerning mental illness. Chandra, what's your question?
Hi, yes, hello, Jade and Claudeliah. So my question, well, as an educator with a background in rehabilitative services, I witnessed Black males disproportionately prescribed stimulants, antidepressants, psychotic, anti-anxiety, and mood stabilizing medications. In addition to your Breakthrough for Men, Boys, and Fathers policy, you currently have policies in place to combat systematic racism through healthcare and education reform. Do you see the misdiagnosis and over-medication of Black males as a critical component in the contribution of systematic racism? And do you have a plan in place to disincentivize pharmaceuticals as a first response to mental health while incentivizing the referral and use of adequate individual and family counseling services?
So, and Claudia, you may have, I'll throw this one to you as well. I will tell you that this one does hit home personally for me. And it's funny you talk about the disproportion, because it also hits the Black community in another way, and Hispanic as well. Is that in our school system, what we tend to see sometimes is that young Black and Hispanic boys more quickly get a disciplinary referral instead of a diagnosis. And so you'll see their white peers get a mental health or behavioral disorder diagnosis instead of being treated with disciplinary action for a behavior issue. And so that's also a flip side of what you're talking about, because that ends up fueling a school to prison pipeline, because it increases a lot of times the isolation and alienation of that child, which leads to suspension and expulsion because of absenteeism. And we know that the greater the rate of suspension and expulsion, you see there often leads then later interaction with law enforcement and imprisonment. So there's a flip side there. I do believe that over medication, I want to be careful for all of our psychological services, healthcare providers. I can tell you from what I've seen is I do sometimes see an unwillingness to push beyond the easy diagnosis. That increase you talk about is especially in ADD, ADHD. And the choice to go on medicine is a very difficult one for many families. And one thing we don't want to do is put our kids through that really difficult process of when you have to find the right medication. And so for 2 or 3 months, you don't have your child because their body's trying to adjust to this medication. I do think what it fuels is a misunderstanding of who these boys are. And I think we jump to the conclusion that these are people that need to be medicated into a place where we feel like we can handle them and manage them, while others are treated with a different kind of compassion and understanding, or, oh, that's just their personality, that's just their learning style. So I do see a disparity there. And it's one of the areas in our long form of that breakthrough plan. You'll see us talk about diagnoses and the disparities there and the things that we have to be much more mindful of. At the end of the day, I do believe this is something that parents will have to take a much firmer interest in and stand on. I believe that education reform and these types of reforms start in the home. And so you'll see us focus a lot on what does providing strength for families look like, so that they can be the first to spot these things and decide on courses of treatment before others get involved. Claudeliah, did you have anything to add on that?
The only thing that I would add to that, Jade, is that healthcare component tied to your ability to pay for adequate health care is also important in this. And so when you talked about kind of having a child who needs to have the correct diagnosis, and when you have, whether it's a single mom or someone who's already struggling, and so having to take them to various providers to get them diagnosed correctly in the beginning, and not just medicate them, but actually figure out what is the correct diagnosis, that also plays into it. And so what you're going to see, Chandra, from the Simmons Road administration is this holistic approach to solving issues like that. It's not just an issue of, okay, we're just handing them pills, but there's an educational aspect to it. There's a quality and access to good healthcare piece that's a part of it too, in order to prevent that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So next we have Steve from Kentucky, and his topic is Donald Trump. What you got, Steve?
You're on mute right there. You're on mute. Can you unmute?
You're still muted.
Let's see. Uh-oh, he went away.
He left instead.
Come back in.
Okay.
There he is.
There he is.
Let's see. Little mute button is stubborn tonight. There you are.
There it is. I guess I have to be the one to turn it to Donald Trump.
Let's do it. Come on.
Thank you both for offering us hope. A lot of us are stuck out here in the wilderness with no home politically. But my question about Donald Trump is, how would you handle the powerful Twitter force that he uses to attack, and he certainly would attack both of you as president and vice president? Would you respond to him or ignore him? What would be the policy?
We already kind of have a policy for how we deal with naysayers on social media. And so we sort of have like a litmus test. Does the person really want an answer, or do they just want an argument? Because we're busy around here looking for solutions. So the only reason we take time to respond is if deception is being perpetuated, which I do feel like in the case of Donald Trump, that might keep us pretty busy on Twitter. But I think, for someone like the president currently, I don't feel that he uses Twitter in any hopes of getting into productive discourse. And anytime I would respond, it would be to tell the truth. So for instance, if he were to tweet right now that, let's say it was pre-COVID, and he said, listen, we're having our best jobs number ever. African community should be so happy. I've done more for them than any other president. I'd probably respond to that. And I would say, well, if 2 to 3 jobs, someone having to work 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet is progress, then I guess you can cheer for that. So we as the American people have to stop buying into Twitter posts as law, Twitter posts as truth, and do our research. I would wonder why grandmas are going back to work at McDonald's when they should be retiring, in their golden years, if the economy is doing so great. So those are the types of, it's only reason to me to respond to someone that I don't really believe is looking for true discourse, is to put out an alternative reality, which is actually the truth, in order to leave a trail of truth, so that when people find his tweets, they also find the truth that I believe they should hear instead. Claudelia, anyway, go at that any differently, or?
I'm not active on Twitter for a reason. So any motivation that I would have to do that at this point, just to respond to Donald Trump, is probably diminished. But again, I think the motivation that we would have to respond to that is really to set the record straight, and to ensure that the American people have a trusted source of information. Mm-hmm. That has been one of the most difficult things for me in these last several years, is that it's difficult to find what the truth is. Mm-hmm. And that if here's the state for the American people, that from our leadership at the very top, we're having difficulty understanding what the truth is, and we're left in the state of confusion. To me, that's the highest disservice that a leader can provide to his people. Our job as leaders is to provide clarity and direction to people. And so that's what we seek to do.
Yeah. And Steve, I think we look forward to using social media much differently.
Yeah.
I think it's been used as a divisive force to spread propaganda and skewed narratives. I look forward to actually inspiring people to be better than they already are, to lean into the leadership void that it will take all of us to fill. That's how I would use Twitter. I probably wouldn't spend much time corresponding with anyone who was just looking to get into a fight.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So next up, we have Donald from Mississippi, who has a question concerning education.
Good evening, ladies. How are you all doing today?
Fantastic. How are you, Donald?
I'm well, thank you. As an educator myself, as well as an educational consultant, I'm, as you clearly see on my hat, proud HBCU grad. I'm Go Bulldogs. I have a couple of questions in regards of not just HBCU, but also education in overall. One, what would be your plan to further assist HBCUs to progress itself even further, get its name out there, to be just as proactive and strong as many of the PWIs? Second question, same concept. However, how would you be able to reinstate HBCUs that recently lost their accreditation years ago to reestablish itself? A prime example would be Knoxville College. Was huge in Knoxville for Black and brown people in math, education, and even in nursing. And when the new initiative came out, the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, to diversify itself years ago, they filtered a lot of the students from Knoxville College into UT Knoxville, and now the school is basically in ruins. With only like 5 people are still there. And the last question is,
write it down. Hold on.
I'm a debate coach also. So
I love it. Let's do it.
And the last thing, just long-term plans in regards to rectify the public education system that we currently have that has been kind of gutted by Betsy DeVos, who it irritates me just saying her name.
Yeah.
So just those 3 questions, and that's it. Thank you.
The last one again. What's the last one?
Yeah.
I got caught on Betsy DeVos.
I'm sorry. I apologize for dampering the mood here. What are your long-term plans to rectify the public education system from K-12?
Okay, I'm going to give you some popcorn quick answers here because this is an issue we focus on our website.
Yes.
And we launched with it for a reason, because nobody was talking about it. Everybody was talking about rightfully law enforcement reform, criminal justice reform, as if just doing that one thing was going to see us into a new era. You must at least do 3 things. Educational reform is one of them, economic reform, and social justice, criminal justice reform. You have to have all 3 slices of the pie. One of the things we talk about, I'll pick 1 or 2 things, because if you go there, you look at the shades of breakthrough and breakthrough for Black America. We specifically address HBCUs. They must be fully endowed. I do believe now that that is a conversation with government and private sector. And I think that's a powerful combination. Here's coming into your second part there, though. We're reinstituting. If we also are fully endowing, we have to hold our schools accountable for financial transparency and better financial management. We do see some pretty rough cases where students are not being served powerfully, where money is not being used in the interest of the education, but more in service to the leaders of these institutions, and that's not okay. And so as we begin to lift those organizations up, you said HBCUs and how Knoxville was good for Black people. I want to rephrase that. HBCUs have been great for America. 50% of our doctors, our teachers come out of HBCUs. And we know that disproportionately in our healthcare system, in our education system, children of color suffer. They are served better when they see healthcare providers and teachers who look like them. So we have incentive to power those universities because they power us. They have a history of powering us. Long-term plans to rectify education. Current education system, I haven't found a teacher who's disagreed yet, is woefully behind the times. We're still using curriculum that really was built for us from the 1940s and 50s when we were just teaching people to learn by rote. We must now firstly have a historic reform in our history curriculum. And I am specifically talking about how we address African and African American history. We have limited all peoples, mind you. When we reform how we teach African and African American history, it is not only good for Black kids. Everyone needs the knowledge. The history of Africa is a part of the history of the world. So the same way we learn about Asian dynasties and European kingdoms, we should know what Africa was. We should also understand, as someone said to us from Ghana today, that our history, of course, didn't start at slavery. It was interrupted by slavery. And so much of the world genuinely is ignorant of that history. And I believe you want to talk about real reconciliation, then you teach the whole truth so people can have a much different outlook of who they are and who they're sitting in the room with. So that's kind of my popcorn answers there for those 3. Did you want to add anything, Claudeliah? But I hope you did hear that first part. I do believe there's a financial infusion due to HBCUs, and I believe that powers all of us as a nation.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I do want to add to on the HBCU and empowerment and improvement point, being a senior engineer, technology director within aerospace and defense, is that there has to be that tie to industry and the industry investment with HBCUs. It can't be operating in isolation just for education, but it has to be tied to that, hey, when you graduate, there is a pipeline to industry right away. And in reverse, industry has to be investing into the universities as well, whether it's research topics, whether it's partnering with professors and students to understand how do customers work in this space, what does the application of your education look like outside of school. There has to be that partnership.
Yeah, and also it's strategic. It's also politically strategic. The reason you don't see progress in these areas is because we politicize the issues and we go to our corners. If you talk about strategic elements to this, then you can even get really crazy and talk about debt-free education specifically in certain areas like criminal justice reform, law enforcement, healthcare, and education. Because if we can incentivize more people, Black, white, Asian, but if you can incentivize more people, especially people of color, to go into these fields, not have to be worried about the debt that they're going to accumulate when COVID-19 hits, you're not looking at a shortage of healthcare providers, right? And so I think there's a lot of wonderful ways to serve the nation by serving historically underserved populations as well.
All right, thank you. So we have Chef Dice here from New York with a question on the write-in voting process.
Yes, ma'am. You're on mute. Mute button's getting us all tonight. There you are.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Jade Simmons, for giving me the opportunity to come on and inquire with you with respect to the writing ballot. I want the community and my social media audience to have more information and awareness as to being able to go to the polls on November 3rd and being aware of all options with writing in a potential.
We're excited.
candidate.
New York is already someplace. We are good to go. We are filed there. We have electors in waiting. So people in New York, depending on when you're early voting, I think you haven't started your early voting yet, have you? October 27th. Yeah. So on that day, you don't even have to wait until November 3rd. You can go down to the polls and write us in. And what we are called registered write-ins, which is what we are in the majority of states. That's very different than I like Chef Dice's hair, so I'm writing her in, right? So it's a nice gesture, but I'm sure you're a little busy not running the country, right? And also you didn't register to run in New York. So we did the work of registering in all the states possible. And in that case, you simply go down, you should see our name on a write-in list. Some states don't print a write-in list, right? But we have a map at operationrestoration2020.com that shows the states you can already vote for us in right now, or November 3rd when the polls open, and you simply write in our name. Will you even still get credit if you misspell it, right? So the real deal is people don't know that that's a valid vote. It counts the same way as if you were to bubble in next to Joe Biden or bubble in next to Donald J. Trump. We just say, read the directions. We do believe this will be an election season where people need to pay attention. They need to read directions and make sure that they don't give anyone any reason to disqualify their vote. So tell your people, thank you for sharing us to your followers as well. But let them know New York's a go. They can go down as soon as the polls open and write us in.
Awesome. And if I may, I wanted to gauge your thoughts on the lack of partnership with celebrity political activists like Tamika Mallory, Jamel Hill, like your thoughts on them not mentioning and supporting another Black woman of color running in such an imperative race. I wanted to gauge your perspective on not being.
What's your perspective? What's your perspective?
I was truly taken aback.
Okay.
I think it's a disappointment when we're trying to move forward as a culture and a community to know that you would be the third woman of color, if I'm correct, historically, to be running as a presidential candidate. And considering that if I was to guess, there is also a diverse cultural background similar to Kamala, whereas it seems like the credentials were there.
Yeah. So that
to be more on a public platform.
Okay, so that by itself, we could do a whole show on. Shay, no, we've covered that segment on her show as well. I'm going to try to give a new answer because my other answers are well documented. The number one Goliath that we have faced. Second is the media shutout, right? And that includes the celebrity shutout. But the number one Goliath has been fear. It's been fear. And that fear has been fed to us by both political parties. And we have been tricked into believing that any one person is going to be our savior. And we've been lied to that it will always have to be one of these two sides. So you imagine now a people who have not seen themselves represented consistently at the highest levels, especially in the form of females. And you bring to the table now female and Black and independent, refuses to choose a side, speaks her mind, does not sound like what you've heard before, is not shuffling you to one side or the other, but is asking you to think powerfully and then dare to vote against what you voted before. People are afraid of that. So I'm going to give a little more onus to fear than I normally do, but it is really what the underlying issue is. In terms of the celebrities, I'll tell you what, I was texting one of our people today and I said, man, a lot of people look like they were much more hardcore and edgy than they really are. And so we hear a lot of people out there talking about it. They're not happy with either choice. They've heard from us. And what the real fear is association. Do we want to associate with someone who might lose? Do we want to associate with someone who might split the vote? Out of our 10 months on the campaign trail, one mayor has sat down with us. One representative from the NAACP has sat down with us. And it's sheer fear because they don't want to risk being associated with someone that's outside of their party. What we're realizing, and the celebrities who I thought were really fans of these politicians, we found out were being paid by these politicians. So that was eye-opening and disappointing, and we refused to pay to play. And so when you stand by your principles, it's going to, in the beginning, put you at a loss. But you get to go to bed every night knowing that the people who support you actually support you and that you're representing a vision that they can believe in.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Of course. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Next, we have Jaquela from Florida, and she has a question concerning media invisibility. Right on the top of that last commentary.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, lady.
Hi. So thank you so much for having me on here. The last lady who just spoke, she had like all the questions that was in my head. I'm like, oh gosh, like please stop. But one of the things that I wanted to ask about, because I wanted to know, like, no one knows your name. No one knows, Miss Roze. And even, so we don't see you. When I Google independent presidential candidates, I didn't see you. When you go online, we don't see you. And so when I'm talking to people and I'm sharing with them your viewpoints and sharing with them your website, they're looking at me like, I don't know who these ladies are. Why would I vote for someone? So like you said, the vote will be split and Trump will win. This is what I'm hearing. And so it's like, what do we do? People don't even know how to write a name in when I'm talking to them about writing your name in. They're like, that's an option. So I feel like there's a true ignorance as to how to properly do this, because so many people probably have never voted in their lives. And now we've got two strong women of God. And these are all things that people are not used to, but how do we get your name out there? Get your viewpoints out there and get people to see you before it's too late. We have less than a month. What do we need to do?
The good news is that this is when people start paying attention. What we believe, Jaquela, is that our first goal had to be to stay standing and to be legally viable in as many states as possible. And what we believe would start to happen is starting to happen. We believe that as we got closer to November 3rd, we would be forced to really stare the reality of the two options that have been forced down our throats in the face. And that if we were really serious about what we need for the new era ahead, we couldn't lie to ourselves that the two options were that answer. And sure enough, the first presidential debates, you know what happened? Afterwards, the search for alternative candidates went up 400% on Google. Americans were like, this can't be it. This cannot be it. And they started searching. Sidebar, we need to ask, instead of throwing the suspicion at the candidate, ask yourself why suddenly you can't find me on Google. If you Google Jade Simmons pianist, you'll find my website, #1, every article written about me since I was 12, you can find it. You Google Jade Simmons president, crickets, right? You ask your media outlets why they don't cover us when technically their own laws, Fair Coverage Act, says that they're supposed to. And what it is because a presidential election year is the biggest revenue-making season for our media networks. And our media networks are aligned on the right and on the left. We know this because we had to buy media for that national commercial. What we also know is that if I really want coverage, let's say you got your own network, Jaquela, what I would have to do is spend money on your network and then come to you on the other side and said, since we spent money with you, will you come out and cover us? Because we might spend some more money with you. And then you might cover us. And so for those networks to cover us, if we're not paying millions of ads to them, is literally in their minds a conflict of interest because they are paid for by each of these political parties. And so we now understand a part of our job too has been, it's like an expose on the process that so many Americans don't know are in place to manipulate their vote. But short answer, Claudeliah may have it. Do you want to cover what do we need people to do? How can they help us get the word out?
Yeah, I mean, we have strong supporters on social media. I think that is one of the best ways that we can get the word out. We have merchandise that we would love to send to our supporters, bumper stickers, yard signs, anything that we can help with. We'd love to get that out to you. I think that's another great way to do it. And just continue to share the word, whether it's on the media suppression that we're experiencing and voter suppression, or just the fact that we have a strong vision, point people to our website, www.operationrestoration2020.com. I think that's another great way. And then just continue to spread the word. One thing that Jade and I always do is when these topics come up, which they're, we're being pulled into a lot more political conversations these days with less than a month left, bring up, there's someone who I really believe in her vision for the United States. Check out her website and just continue to spread the word. I think that's the best way to do it.
And I would say share intentionally, right? Don't just repost a video, but say right around 2 minutes and 30 seconds, this lady speaks my heart on enter issue here, because your followers trust you. They know your heart. They don't know ours yet. So when you say specifically, this is what gets me, this is why I am doing this wild thing, people tend to listen more strategically. If you want to help as well, we're noticing now international media is paying more attention. And the good thing about American media being green driven is that they don't want BBC covering you and they're not covering you, right? Or Indian networks covering you, Colombian networks covering you. So we're now kind of working outside in. And I think at the end of the day, though, it's going to be a memorandum on Americans having to decide for themselves to look elsewhere. Because as the BBC article just presented, 1,200 people registered this year to run for president. The least you can do is look at the 4 or 5 that are still here.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Our next question comes from Isaac. And Isaac is from New Mexico, and he has a question concerning the arts.
Okay. It's kind of a complex question. So, kind of based on a lot of the things you've just said, there is half of the country just feels like giving up. What's the point in voting? What's the point in doing anything? A lot of my friends are like, why even vote? And you have a lot of other people, the other half, who are like, no, we have to do this. We have to vote for this candidate so that we can get this. Or like the people like us who are here, we want to vote for you because we want some actual change. As a leader and as an artist, how do we find a way to move forward when it seems there's nothing but failure all around us? Our country, our own country is failing us. Our own government is failing us. Our own system of how to apply for presidency is failing us.
Yeah.
How do we find a way to move forward?
I think the focus has to be, if everything is failing us, how do I not fail myself in this moment? If I know I see a vision that I resonate with, and the only reason I am not voting that way is to win, then we have to now redefine what winning actually means. If this is a season where you're in some of the grossest, most rabid social unrest, civil unrest, racial unrest, can we afford to win by voting for an instigator in chief who will only fan the flames of animosity? If this is a season where you say you want more than symbolism, you want actual progress, actual solutions that provide access to opportunity for more Americans, you want something that looks different in terms of criminal justice reform, you want real law enforcement reconstruction that doesn't demonize law enforcement, but that doesn't deny that there aren't serious issues with the system that must be reconstructed, then how can you vote for someone who was a part of the crime bill that incarcerated so many African Americans and say that you want progress? You see, we have to now get real with ourselves. People will say, Isaac, you know, it's a wasted vote for her because she can't win. It's a wasted vote. The wasted vote is a vote for something that you do not believe in. And so if you don't want to give up in this season, you got to start by not giving up on yourself. What is so wild numbers wise, we love the fact that there are all these people saying they don't want to vote this year, because when they find us, they go, now I have a reason to vote. We have become the home for the politically homeless. What we've done is dismiss that 100 million that don't vote. We've demonized them. We've called them slackers. But I know from talking to many of you, y'all aren't slackers. And even you were saying, I just can't do it. I can't do it again. Not like this. And so we feel like we've provided a home, Isaac, for people who say, if the nation fails me, I know one thing, I am not going to fail myself. I am going to vote vision over fear. And what I said by the numbers is that if everybody who actually knew about us and saw us and read our policy and resonated, voted for us instead of voting against something, we'd win in a landslide, a historic landslide. 60% of Americans don't feel at home in either political party. 100 million people don't vote. 7 million 17-year-olds turn 18 in time for this election. They all want something new. The 100 million are more than Republicans and Democrats and independents combined. So all we need is the wake-up call, Isaac. So we believe we're standing firm as that wake-up call, and we're standing long enough so that people like you can vote vision over fear.
Our next question comes from Ed. Ed from Mississippi has a question on life after the election.
Yes, good evening. Like many people here, I'm a firm supporter of Jade Simmons. I brought some friends of mine along.
Wow, thank you.
So, yes, very big supporter. And so I don't have my police uniform today, unfortunately, but I'm the same guy that's on the cover. I was surprised that my mom would say, hey, that's me over there.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm the police guy. Hello, everybody.
Thank you for your service, for your work.
Thank you, madam. My quick, easy question, of course, like I said, what would life be like after election? It's 2021, it's November. You have a multitude of supporters who still believe in your vision and what it is you want and how you see America to be and can be. But whatever happened. Either you are president or you aren't. 2021, what are we up to? What are we doing?
Yeah. The way we focus within our team is we only plan for one outcome. You can always figure out what to do if that outcome doesn't come to pass. But your energy and your focus must be on, if you're serious about being full of faith, that means we're behind the scenes right now planning a transition. Someone asked in the questions, who's your Secretary of State? You know, we're talking already about, you know, if they Of course, we know now they're probably going to confirm Amy Coney Barrett. But if that option had been given to us, who were our lineups? Who would be our attorney general as we revamp the Department of Justice? So we're planning as if there's only one option. So because of that, I'm going to answer you as if we are in the White House. Imagine an inauguration that features reconciliation and restoration, not rhetoric. Imagine a first 100 days where the president puts their vanity and their legacy aside and focuses on carrying down through to the legacy of the people that they are there to serve. Imagine on November 4th, well, it's probably going to take a few more days than that to find out the results, just heads up. But imagine whatever day they announce their results, that next day, Americans can wake up and at least breathe easy about this one thing. They won't have to wonder whose side the president is on. When does the fighting commence? When is the president going to get back at me because I didn't vote for her? I think just the relief of a palate cleansing presidency will bring so much hope. When an independent like Claudeliah and I win, every president has a mandate. The mandate comes from the party, not the people, the party. You have an independent president, where does the mandate come from? The people. Because if the whole of this US puts an independent in office, they are unanimously saying we are done with politics as usual. That forces right and left to level up in a different way, because Americans are saying, we don't want what you've been doing, we want what they offer. That puts us in a whole different kind of negotiating standpoint. And I think what we get to do is breathe easy, not that the problems are over, but that you can trust the person in office to make decisions that are going to prioritize people every single time. And I do believe that switch in atmosphere and tone will be felt very tangibly. And I think that sparks the recovery and the restoration that our nation needs. So I love imagining that. I believe in visualization. And I see one of the most colorful inaugurations. I see one of the most healing processes going between November to January. And I see Americans being able to regain trust that their leaders are existing to serve them.
Yeah, it's good.
I tip my hat to you, and I bid you a fond farewell and a great evening. Thank you.
Do you want to add to that quickly? I know we're supposed to be popcorning at this point. Anything to add?
You nailed it, Madam President.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I knew I liked her for a reason.
And great question, Ed. I love that.
Yeah. Thank you so
All
much.
right. All right. We've got a few questions left. Next up is Michelle from Maryland. She has a question concerning religious freedoms. Michelle, you're up.
All right. Good evening. My question is, Congress passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in 1993. And under that act, the federal government cannot pass a law that restricts religious freedom unless the law helps to advance a governmental interest, and the law is the least restrictive way to advance the governmental interest. As president, how would you safeguard religious freedom pertaining to laws such as the H.R. 5 Equality Act, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, race, and other purposes concerning Christians from discrimination in the workplace, owning a business, beliefs and practices, and especially nonprofit organizations?
Okay, Claudeliah, you want to lead on that one?
Can you rephrase your question again? I'm sorry.
Oh, did you miss it while you were gone? I did.
I did.
Okay.
If you want to start, and then I can weigh in.
What's the nut? How would you rephrase that in a nutshell, Michelle?
To rephrase it in a nutshell, as president or even vice president, how would you safeguard religious freedom for people, for Christians? Right now, the law that was put into place in 1993, it covers a wide range of people, and it puts a category out there for them, such as same-sex, gender identity, sexual orientation. They're connecting that with race and other things. How would you champion religious freedom for Christians in the workplace, owning a business, our beliefs, our practices, and especially nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for rephrasing that too, Michelle. So I'll touch on this quickly too, because I know we have several other questions. And if you go to the website, you will see policy outlined for that, especially when we talk about the LGBTQ community, right? A big portion of our platform is respect and value for every American citizen, whether you believe the same way as we do or not. The flip side of that, though, is also protecting the religious practices and freedoms of American citizens. What you'll see from us is not necessarily a push to repeal laws and acts that have been put in place. What you will see is protection, especially for private businesses, private religious businesses that choose to conduct their business a certain way. They have individuals that they want to share their vision and who they hire and who they bring in. You will see us protecting those rights, as well as the rights of LGBTQ to gain employment, to have access to health care. One of the things that's really prevalent for Jade and I is that you can't legislate morality. And the other side of that is that you also cannot legislate against immorality. We do believe in people's free will, and we believe in the protection of the rights of each individual citizen to practice their religious freedoms the way that they choose to do that.
Yeah, we always say either you're a nation of religious freedom or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And we have already said that's who we are. And I'll be really frank with you. One of the reasons that we're running so boldly with our faith out front is not because we're trying to proselytize the nation. It's because we do want to set a very stark comparison and contrast with what people may think faith-based leadership looks like. So we do believe we have been subjected to what looks like religious manipulation. We've seen scripture that we hold dearly taken out of context. But truth is, Michelle, one of the reasons that the right has been so successful amongst Christians is because it's been the first time in a long time that Christians have been given a voice. So we should speak openly about that. And I think that's when you look at, people will say you're going to be a Jill Stein 2.0. She cost Hillary Clinton the election. No, Hillary Clinton cost Hillary Clinton the election. And a part of that is because she did not speak to many people groups and took many of those voters for granted. And there has been an underserved community amongst believers and followers of faith, followers of Christ especially, that does seem to be uniquely demonized, uniquely set out, uniquely called backwards when we don't agree with a stance that maybe the rest of society believes, and we might believe differently. And so what we've been saying is, can we strip away all the titles first? So we don't serve you first as a Christian, first as a person in the LGBTQ community, first as a Native American. We serve you first as a human. So if I fight for the right for this human over here to be able to speak his mind, even if I don't agree for it, right? I must also fight for that same right for a Christian to be able to speak their mind, even if I don't agree for it. If I care about the death of George Floyd and I'm outraged about it, I've also got to care about the death of a transgender woman. I should be equally outraged. And so what we believe we're forcing is a much more nuanced and broader conversation about religious freedom. And I do believe that followers of Christ have been disproportionately silenced. And I do believe it is time for us all to be able to speak our convictions freely. As Jay said at the beginning, have civic conversation, agree not to disagree, and also work to make sure basic rights of speech and of expression especially are protected.
Excellent.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Our next question is from UDF from California on election campaign reform.
Oh.
Yes. So I guess the question is, with all the hoops that Operation Restoration has gone through with voter suppression, what about Indiana and Texas and just media, all this stuff, the manipulation and behind the scenes that you had to deal with, why haven't we seen a platform on election campaign reform?
You mean from us?
Yeah.
I don't think we knew how much we needed it until we started running. I think we might add 21 top platform policies. That may be the 21st. Listen, we always felt strongly about running a clean campaign. And we all came into it with a bit of realism, a little bit of sarcasm and cynicism even, but our eyes have been opened to what really exists, and it's worse than we thought. It's a travesty that when you have the written requirements to run for president are simply to be 35, live in the US 14 years, be a US citizen. Yet really what the requirements are, you should have about $1 billion in the bank. You must run with the political party, and you need to have corporate sponsors. That's the unspoken rules. And I think what we've done is we've cheated ourselves now out of some incredible leadership opportunities. A young woman in Ghana who's looking to run for president was planning to run this year, and they, by 100%, increased the price to run. There's a filing fee. So instantly she was not able to run. You see, if we're not careful, we start looking like the very nations that we shame as backwards and not having democracy. We went all the way over to Europe to teach them how to run elections, and we told them they needed to have multiple options on their ballot, and then we came back and didn't do the same. So I think, we're not at November 3rd yet. They may be one of our new platforms coming out. I would want to reform what we're seeing done with PACs. We have run this campaign. A shoestring budget would not even be, it'd be an underestimate of grand proportions. And yet we've watched the squandering of millions and billions in the attainment of power. That money could have done so many wonderful things for the people that these politicians are claiming they want to serve. And so I think there's a lot of expose to come, and you will see election reform coming back to the top of what we're doing. I think, Claudeliah, you'd agree on that one.
You know what? I'm already drafting bullets for that election reform.
I got a couple executive orders. Yeah. It's in there.
Good question.
All right, we're down to our last two questions. We have Derek and Latrice from Florida, and they have a question concerning military.
Hello, Jade and Claudeliah.
Hi.
I gotta say, you guys are doing a great job of speaking what I've been thinking for a long time now. So
thank you.
My question is, our military is currently involved with a lot of conflicts throughout the world. So how do you foresee ensuring that our U.S. homeland security is balanced while maintaining that global military presence?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we've got a couple minutes left. I will say that I think we do a really good job of detailing that on the website, but I will highlight a couple of points. So, one of the things that we have found out as we're engaging with our military, I come from a military family, is that we haven't always done the best job of employing our military service and women where they serve and can be utilized best, especially in some of our foreign conflicts. One of the things that I think we find painful is when we deploy our troops to do long terms of training, other countries' troops. So whereas we could have gone in very quickly, dealt with an issue, and brought our troops home, instead we're what I would call languishing there for years while we're trying to bring them up to snuff and help them to figure out their in-country issues. What we would love to see, and we do detail on our website, is empowering and better utilization of our State Department, some of our other organizations such as Green Berets, which are well suited to go in and train other countries' forces. Our point is to use our military servicemen and women where they serve best, make sure that talk about that being pro-family and pro-human, making sure that they have that stability at home where they're not only limited to serving our country, but also being able to build the healthy families that they need as well. So I think you're going to see a very targeted look at deployment times. You're going to see a very targeted look at how well we're utilizing our military men and women overseas, and kind of a revamping of that structure.
Yeah, I'll only add that we boast, or at least the current president boasts often, about how much money has been spent on the military. That we've got the best financed military with the best ships and the best weaponry, yet we still have enlisted members on welfare. See, that's a gross disparity, and those are the sorts of gaps that we have to begin to bridge. We can't present this one face to the world and talk in this macho rhetoric about military when our military families are breaking up because of lack of counseling services, when you have the wives who are in Station 1 place, because that's the only place they can get the medical treatment they need that's under the military insurance that they have. And then the husband, and so that she doesn't get knocked off of the treatment plan, takes a 365, right, and goes away for a year so that his wife can stay and have the treatment without them being deployed elsewhere. It's those kinds of glitches that make us look in the mirror and say, how much do we value the servicemen and women who are serving us and putting their lives on the line? We have to care about their families as much as we care about non-military families, and make sure that they have access to life and being able to live it more abundantly and prosperously as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Last but certainly not least, we have Shem from California, and she has a question concerning the first 100 days in office as well as the Constitution.
Oh, well, thank you, Miss Roze and Miss Simmons, simply for who you are. First of all, this is more than a campaign. I believe this is a movement. It's more than about winning. It's about your ethics, your principles, and your truly visionary leadership. And I just feel so inspired and engaged and informed, like honestly, never before in my adult life since I was 17 or 18 years old. So I really appreciate who you are and what you're doing. And it's so much more than just this one moment in time. So you had mentioned previously your plans for COVID-19 response and education and some things that are your top priorities. And of course, those is wonderful that your website has a tremendous amount of detail about your stance on various platform issues. But I would just like to give you the opportunity to share a little bit more about your vision, because for those first 100 days in office are just going to fly by, and there is just a overwhelming cacophony of special interests in politics that you guys, you mentioned about your expose, and I'm excited about that. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, you are.
But just a little bit more about how you're going to hit the ground running.
Okay. Claudeliah, do you want to start?
I'll let you start on that one. I'll tag on.
Okay. I get excited. I'm a visionary. So I get excited. You allow me in that question to really imagine what the atmosphere feels like, but I'll try to stay grounded on what the actual tangibles will be in those first 100 days. This is what I keep saying. It's not an either or season. This is an and. You have to apply everything. We don't have the luxury of just doing one thing. So I think you're going to have to see economic relief. The stimulus package right now is yet again being politicized. And so what that tells me is that in the new year, we're going to look at having to pass another stimulus package, which will increase our deficit, right? And so for those of us who care about those things, you're going to have to really be smart and creative about how do you do both? How do you decrease the deficit? And what do you prioritize? I see what I call quick and fast initiatives that nobody can really disagree with, so that you can serve more Americans powerfully. Think about things like a sales tax vacation, so that people who have yet not been able to go back to work can at least do more with the money that's in their hands. A tariff tax break for small business owners and producers, manufacturers, that's going to be a big deal for them as well. We must focus on increasing testing and tracing capacity. People think that's old news. It's so current, you wouldn't even believe. I can tell you right now in Houston, the system is scattered. Nobody's going to get tested anymore right now at our biggest testing sites. Someone asked to expound on that. What that means is that when we reopened the country, we were woefully under the numbers we needed to be in order to test and trace productively. You'll see us want to fix that system. There are a lot of inconsistencies in it. And then you'll see a focus in those first 100 days on how do you get people back to work powerfully. And I think the focus will actually be on job creation. So imagine if we can combine pandemic proofing the nation with job creation, what that looks like. And now I get to envision. Imagine storehouses being built all over the nation in strategic locations that we didn't have before. A new national inventory coming off of Claudelia's plan of a national strategy, where we know on any given day what Georgia has in its inventory, what New York has in its inventory. Heck, New York will know what New York has in its inventory, right? And then what you do is you get to put people to work in the testing and tracing. We were saying 30,000, it's closer to about 50,000 people instantly hired to be testers and tracers. You prioritize the people who were let off during COVID-19. That's just a fraction of the plan, but we tend to prioritize the actions that can be quick, the least demonized, and the easiest to pass. Someone asked, how do you deal with being an independent and having to manage left and right? well, our policies right now, the way we've written them, you would be lying to yourself if you don't find something in there that serves you. That's why it takes us so long to release policy, is we've tried to set the policy up to not be able to fail. And I also believe that you must present policy in bite-sized pieces so that you don't have 1,600-page documents that are more like performance art than actual legislation that would do Americans well. Claudelia?
Yes. So what I want to add to that, so Shem, what Jade gave you is a fantastic 100 days focused on what we're going to do domestically. While we've been inundated with COVID-19 and racial tensions and this crazy political environment, there are international that we have not kept our eye on.
Here she goes with South China Sea, right? Here it comes.
South China Sea. But what I will say is that China has increased its aggressions on Taiwan, which is a huge manufacturing powerhouse for the United States. We have got to turn our eye back to that and re-engage. Also, in the wake of the agreements, the trade agreements with Israel, which I do agree is a good thing, Iran has increased its aggressions.
That's right.
We have got to turn our focus back to that as well. So as Jade gets her focus on things domestically in that first 100 days, day 101, you best believe we're turning our eye back to international relations and making sure that the United States reestablishes ourselves as a world leader.
That's right.
Well, thank you both so much for just your heart, your true heart for this movement that you've created together and how you found each other to make this amazing leadership team. And thank you for including me and letting me ask my questions. And I'm sure for everyone else who had a chance to speak tonight too, we really, really appreciate you and we believe in you and we're here to support you because you're here for us and we believe that 100%.
Thank you so much. And thank you to those who hadn't believed in us before the night and still came on and asked powerful questions. It was important to us that we didn't stock the camp, right? Full of people who were just going to pat us on the back, but that people who would challenge us and ask us. So we're so grateful for all of the people who tuned in and who participated.
Absolutely.
Claudelia, Jade, these were some good questions tonight.
Great questions. And Shay, before we end, I do want to say to our visitors, Derek and Latrice, thank you for your service.
That's right.
I'm assuming that your question, your military-based question, was because you have served. And so my heart to yours, thank you so much for your sacrifice.
It's good.
Any final thoughts from either of you on this evening or anything that you want to share before we close our virtual town hall?
So I'll go ahead. I am excited about the next month, less than a month that we have to the elections. I am excited about the engaged and excited supporters that we have. And what I will say is, continue to vote for vision. Make sure you share that with everyone in your circle, just as we are doing. I think that we are at a very pivotal point in American history. We can choose to go really one of two ways. And I'm optimistic that we're going to choose right. And so, we're here. Make sure you let people know about us. Again, check out our platform, our policy. If it resonates with you, vote vision over fear.
Yeah. Thank you for Jamia tuning in as well. She's been a long time supporter, one of the first people to buy in early in the game, so to speak. And it's been incredible to watch supporters like her and others who have just said, you know what? I'm going to just go all out with this thing. And Shay, just as people have come for us, they have come for our supporters. And I'll tell you what's been so empowering is that what should feel like rejection, what should feel like animosity or hate, we joke about the naysayers because we understand that man is never going to invite you to disrupt his paradigms.
That's right.
So whenever you start getting in there and messing with something, even when we know it's bad, right? I mean, you can use that awful metaphor of being in a domestic situation with an abuser. We stay. We know it's not good for us, but we're familiar with it. And we believe that we are called to begin to help Americans wake up and say, I don't have to take this. The least I can do is take my vote back. When people say you're taking Biden's votes, Christians say you're taking Trump's votes. No. Those are your votes. It's your decision to decide where they go. So I will second Claudelia. We believe there is more disruption coming, for better and for worse, that things are still going to be shaken to its core. It's going to be exposed. And what people are going to be left with, I think we said this, Shade, the decision is on us now. We keep trying to put it on these different leaders vying for office. Really, the power rests in us. And I think we have a powerful opportunity in this uncommon moment to do something uncommon that will serve more people than ever before. And we're just honored. You know, they always say, don't start measuring the drapes. Last thing on my mind is the drapes. Right? Last thing on my mind is the drapes. We hire somebody for all of that. I'm thinking about, when can we raise minimum wage? What's the first date? Is that an executive order? You know, what can we do right away to make Americans be able to just breathe and go, you know what? Not only are we going to survive this, but we're going to thrive. So we just encourage people, do your due diligence, hold us accountable. Don't let this be the first time you've listened in and never listened again. Do your homework and see if what we're saying would serve you powerfully. And then we'd be honored to do just that.
Thank you, ladies. So good. And all of those who joined us this evening to ask your questions and participated, and those who have joined us live and hanging out with us for an hour and a half here. We're so grateful that you spent some time with us. I just want to close with a couple of things, couple announcements. Next week, Thursday, October 22nd, at least as far as we know, there will be a presidential debate. I believe regardless of whether there's a presidential debate that's going on between former Vice President Joe Biden and President Trump, that Jade Simmons will be here next Thursday, 10/22, going live and participating. So please join us next week for that. And then also, be sure there's actually a kind of cool, I told you in the beginning that Jade is a classically trained pianist. And so there is a really great fundraiser that's coming up. It's a musical experience and fundraiser with Jade. If you want more information around that, just go to operationrestoration2020.com. And again, go to the website, look at the policies. They've all been laid out. Spend some time there, research, share with those around you if you believe in what's happening here with this movement of Operation Restoration. For all of those, again, thank you so much. Again, I'm Shay Bynes, and it has been a pleasure being with all of you this evening. Take care and God bless.
Hey everyone, it's Jade Simmons here, your one and only truly independent candidate for President of the United States. We promised you, Operation Restoration promised you, we would stay standing for this moment, which is the moment that you actually get to vote for us. We have done the hard work of making sure that we are a viable, powerful option for millions of Americans. For as many Americans possible, we're now available as an option. Go to operationrestoration2020.com. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram, and you'll see that we release a states map. On that map, you're going to see which states you can vote for us in and how to vote for us. Some places you're going to see my name and my running mate's name, Claudeliah J. Roze. You'll see us both on the ballot right next to the other guys. In other states, in the majority of states, we're running as registered write-ins. The key is that word registered, because we did the hard work of going state by state and registering and filing paperwork. When you write us in, that vote counts the exact same as it would as if you were voting with our name on the ballot. It's exactly the same because of that word registered. We've done that work for you. So in some states you'll go, they'll give you a list of all the write-in candidates. Don't be alarmed. There are a lot of write-in candidates that the media also didn't tell you about, but you're there to write us in. You're going to write in my name, Jade Simmons. You'll see the spelling at the bottom there. Some will have a space for you to write in. The vice presidential running mate, Claudeliah Roze. We have that name coming across the screen as well. You can also write in a variation, J Simmons and C Roze. In some places, you'll only have to write in my name, Jade Simmons. Either way, your vote counts powerfully. We believe a wasted vote is only a vote for something that you don't believe in. In some states, they won't provide you with a list of the write-ins. Those states' names are scrolling across the screen right now. And in those states, you still write my name in. They may only have one line. You write Jade Simmons in. You could write J Simmons /C Roze, but they'll know who you're talking about because we've notified them regardless of whether or not they required paperwork. We went over and above to make sure we're available. Let's talk very briefly about the states that you'll see we are challenging. We've been honest about it, quite a bit of candidate suppression, which we also believe is voter suppression. In those states, you'll see that we're challenging them, and we're doing that legally behind the scenes. In other states, we may be putting up a challenge simply because of COVID-19 restrictions and circumstances that made it very difficult to gather signatures in order to be on the ballot. We're disappointed because some of those states were places where you would actually see our name on the ballot. But never fear, we will fight until the last possible minute. Be patient with us. Withhold your vote until it's time. And if we cannot be a viable option, you better believe we'll come and tell you that as well so that you can vote accordingly. But be patient as we fight this out. We have promised to fight and stay standing so that we can be an option for you, and we are going to hold true to that promise. Anyway, we're excited as time winds down. Expectation is high. We're so thrilled that many of you are letting us know you've gone to the polls powerfully, written us in, or voted for us on the ballot, and you felt proud of that vote. You felt excited about what it meant for the future of our nation, and that is exactly what we wanted to do. We have vowed to represent people who do not feel represented, and we are humbled by the way that you are choosing us so powerfully. So thank you. Let us know if you have questions. Email info@operationrestoration2020.com. If you're having any trouble at the polls, if you don't see our name on the write-in list, if we're supposed to be on the ballot and you don't see us, let us know so we can be about the business of rectifying that issue. Okay, be blessed as you go. Be safe as you go. Take care and stay expectant.